Justin Trudeau thinks he knows how to farm better than farmers themselves. Hi, I'm Brian Lilley, political columnist with the Toronto Sun. You've heard about Justin Trudeau's plan to have farmers reduce fertilizer use by 30%. Now, they say it's not reducing fertilizer use, it's nitrous oxide emissions from fertilizer. They want to get at the nasty greenhouse gas and stop that from going out. Trouble is, any farmer I've spoken to says you can't reduce nitrous oxide emissions without also reducing fertilizer use. What do I know? I'm a city boy. I visit the country now and again, but I'm not a farmer. QuickDick McDick, though, that is a mouthful. He's joining us from his farm outside Yorkton, Saskatchewan right now. And I have to ask you, you've been looking at this for a little while. What was your first reaction when you heard this federal plan saying, reduce emissions, but don't worry, it doesn't mean using less fertilizer?
It was troubling because it seems to be what the government has been using on the bottom of their boot, that they're keeping on the back of agriculture in Canada here, as they keep our heads buried down as close to the ground as they can, Brian, because we hear a lot about reducing emissions in regards to emissions from different equipment, transportation, agricultural equipment, and whatnot, which is why we've been hit with a lot of different policies that have caused us to have to spend hundreds of thousands more dollars on emissions on even the side of our diesel engines that we run on a lot of agricultural equipment out here in rural Saskatchewan and all of Canada. So when you hear the government start to head down an emissions path with fertilizers as well, it really got the hair standing on the back of everybody's necks in agriculture, because it's another government policy that would be targeting agriculture, right?
What does reducing fertilizer use by 30%? Because look, the government said, well, there's these other fertilizers that don't do it. Yeah, but it shoves plastic into the ground, and it's not up to scale yet. So what does reducing fertilizer use do to your crop yield at the end of the season?
Well, if we were to look at it through a fertilizer emissions reduction, which is what they continually refer to it as, we already do absolutely everything we can to reduce our fertilizer use. And even like specifically this year, we tried some different stabilizers and some of our nitrogen fertilizers that we put down on an oat crop that we're doing right close to our own feedlot there. So it's really it's really disappointing when you hear the government come at you to try and set, which they call it themselves. It's a very bold statement and an aggressive target that they're setting. Which, first of all, like, well, why are we setting things that we're calling aggressive, or something that already maybe we're admitting that we're not going to be able to achieve? And the bigger problem with this emissions reduction is a lot of how they quantify what we're emitting from nitrogen fertilizers in agriculture here is based on estimates on different formulas that they use in different temperate zones throughout Canada. Not every farm's the same. Not everybody's farming the same commodities. Everybody uses fertilizers different everywhere. And at the end of the year, to your question, for us to reduce our emissions in fertilizer would be just to reduce our use of fertilizer, which would result obviously in a lower output on your land, right? Which puts us in.
That means less money for you, less food for me.
It does. It's less food for us as well, Brian. You have to remember, I think one thing that really gets lost here is the responsibility that farmers have here in Canada is we consume our own food as well, is attached to supplying the rest of Canada with food. We like seeing higher prices for our commodities. We have a shortage in our commodities. That means we're going to see a higher price for our commodities, but we're no different than anybody else. We still go to the grocery store and buy a jug of canola oil, or we will go down and buy different consumables that we'll use. We don't want to see higher prices in the grocery store as well, but that is going to be a result of using 30% less fertilizer.
The government keeps saying things like, well, I mean, farmers just need to learn to rotate crops. I'm pretty sure that predates synthetic fertilizer. I remember learning about crop rotation in a suburban elementary school, so I'm pretty sure you guys learned about it on the farm. And in fact, you're standing in front of a field filled with peas at the moment, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, that's correct. So this is peas are a very important part of our rotations out here because anybody that knows a little bit about agriculture would know that they produce their own nitrogen. We actually don't use a nitrogen fertilizer when we grow peas here, and it's a way to return some natural biodiversity to your soil. Just on the other side of this pea crop, to the south of me here is an actual crop of alfalfa, which also I indicated in my video upload that I did is another rotation that will use it usually 4 years at a time to naturally return nitrogen and soil health back into the different crops that we're going to plant here. But everyone needs to understand that it would make no sense whatsoever for anybody that's involved in agriculture to be out using, first of all, more fertilizer than we would need, or the fact that people think that our use of fertilizer is damaging the soil and our ecosystem. That would be the most regressive work anybody that depends on biodiversity and a healthy ecosystem to have their operation be a success. It would make no sense for us to be out here destroying it. Even if we were to look at overuse of fertilizer is really not such a thing in agriculture. If you overuse a nitrogen fertilizer on a crop, you actually cause more damage to the crop itself than you do good. Land can overproduce. You can burn your crop with too much fertilizer. There's very measured things that we do here to ensure that we're using the exact fertilizer that we need.
Yeah, well, but I mean, the way the government describes it, it sounds like it's your Uncle John got a bunch of fertilizer for the lawn on sale at Canadian Tire, and he's out there in his shorts throwing it all over the place. Even that will burn. You guys, I loved your video where you described all the different specialists that you use. It's not just you sitting there with a pail going, I don't know, let's throw it all on. You're dealing with people who specialize in this before planting. You're dealing with specialized, highly technological equipment, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a combination of your agronomists and working with your equipment manufacturers, software dealers, and whatnot to make sure you're up to date on the latest technology. There's so many different facets of it. Farmers, there's a lot of people out there that do farm that have been to school and have a degree in agronomy and a few different things. Those of us that don't consult with specialists constantly to make sure that we're keeping up on trends, we're good at running equipment. We're good at fixing equipment. We're good at bringing it all together. Farmers don't not use outside advice. We'd be naive to do so. That's why there's so many specialists and professionals in this world that help us to make sure that we're getting the most out of our land and farming for generations to come. Farmers, it's a business and we need to make a profit doing what we do to be able to continue to move our business forward. But a generation of farmers won't farm just for their generation and be with a thought process of when I'm done here, I want this land expired and burnt. I want no soil biodiversity whatsoever. I just want the land to be tarred and barren. There's a reason that there are 5 generations of farming families that continue to pass the farm down to different generations because we farm with the next generation in mind at all times.
What would your message be to the Prime Minister and Minister Bibeau on this? Because I've spoken to individual farmers, I've spoken to industry groups, I've spoken to councils representing different types of farming operations. They all said they weren't consulted. So if you had a chance to sit down with them, what would you say to them and keep it clean?
Okay, well, that's a very big challenge. But so Brian, I was like my message to Minister Bibeau or to Prime Minister Trudeau would be to come visit us, come see what we do. Start giving us credit for what we already do. When we look at low to no till operations that have been happening for the last 25 years on a lot of operations here in Saskatchewan, we no longer have the ability to receive credit for that on our farms. They're coming back out now again this year with another carbon credit offset program. But we need
and for people that don't know, that means you're not disturbing the soil as you seed, which means there's less disruption, less emissions.
One pass. It's a one pass mentality where you will go through and put your fertilizer, your product in all in one pass, which reduces your disturbance and carbon emissions from the soil, right? But it's important to remember that not all of these things work on every single farm. There's places where if we didn't, harrow our field, or if we didn't go with N ahead to be able to do it, especially on a year like this where we had a wet year, we wouldn't be able to get into the field to plant the crops in a timely manner, and therefore would be too late in the growing season to have a successful harvest, where we would wind up putting a lot of the crop through a grain dryer, where again, we're burning natural gas to be able to dry a product that we're forced to pay a carbon tax on from the federal government. We just seem to keep getting lost in all these different mitigation methods that we get pushed on us from the federal government, instead of just stopping for 10 seconds and coming to talk to people and realizing that we actually do a lot of things here to make sure that we are a net negative emitter of carbon here in agriculture in Canada. Prime Minister and Minister, no two fields are the same. And a field that's grown in central Ontario is going to use very different practices than what we're going to use out here in central Saskatchewan. And if we can't recognize the differences in biodiversity and the difference in practices that we use on different agricultural operations, we're doing not only agriculture in Canada a disservice, but the consumers that are going to be forced to pay more money for their products a disservice as well.
All right. Thanks for the time today, and thanks for the words. We'll let the audience have their say. Let us know what you think. Drop a comment down below. Share this on social media. Get the word out so that people know, and make sure you subscribe to our channel.